Great. So welcome to Dublin. Who's here for the first time? Your first stew under your belt, you're all set. Good stuff. So welcome. So I've been at Google, as Anita mentioned, for 10 years, just over 10 years. And I thought what would be interesting today was to share with you some of my insights from that time. And Google has gone through a tremendous change during that period. I mean, when I joined the company, we had 2,000 employees worldwide. There were about 40 here in Dublin. And now, globally, we've got well over 50,000. So it's really been a big change. But the change has happened as well in our industry and for your businesses. And it's been really, really dramatic. But as we've gone through the last 10 years at Google, there are two things that I feel have remained constant all the way through it. And that's the culture that we have within our company. So how we think, the type of people we hire, the type of philosophies that we have. Our mission statement is still very much at the core of what we do. And the second is our focus on innovation. And I think as we think about innovation, there's some certain principles and philosophies that we've adopted in Google, which I think also apply to the world of brand. And what I'd like to do today is to talk you through how we at Google think about innovation in all corners of our business, everything from our food services all the way through to our moonshots factory, as we like to call it, in Google X, and tell you about some of the principles that we see there, and relate them to some of my favorite examples of great branding that I've seen. Some old, so apologies if you've seen it before, but some new. But I think the principles behind each of these is really important. So these are the three themes that we hold true to all of our innovation. And the first one is, you might say, obvious. In fact, most of these we've borrowed or taken from other companies. They're not new. But I think some of the ways in which we've applied them are quite unique. So first is focus on the user. So if you're following the user, surely that's going to help you create products and services and ideas that people are going to want. The freedom to innovate, and finally about thinking big. So let's get cracking and let's start with the first. Focus on the user. So what does this mean? Well, if we ask Larry, our CEO, he would say that there's no substitute for personally watching and listening to real people. That kind of makes sense. That's logical. But we take this to the nth degree. We are constantly watching how people use our products and services and making decisions that we think are going to benefit users in the long term, sometimes very much at the sacrifice of our own short-term goals. I've regularly seen our company take positions on things that we believe are good for the user, knowing that it's going to cost us tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in short-term revenue. But staying true to that principle has been really important for us. And it's helped us to continue to stay in the front of what people are thinking and how they're using technology and what they want. But let me share with you another example from a very, very different industry, this time from the world of healthcare and health technology. And Doug Dietz is a senior engineer at GE Healthcare. And he's a pretty impressive guy. In fact, he created an award-winning MRI machine that broke new territory in terms of its accuracy and the technology it was deploying. They've won awards left, right, and center for this piece of technology. You can see a picture of the machine here. If you're into MRI machines, you would get excited by this, I promise. But Doug was down at one of the hospitals using his device. It happened to be a children's hospital. And he was talking to some of his team, and they were in the waiting room. And there was a little girl just being called to go in. And as soon as she was called and she was on her way in, she started to break down. She got really upset, in fact, hysterical. And the doctors turned around to the mother and said, "It's okay, we can sedate her." She was already very sick. She was being traumatized by the thought of going into this MRI machine. And now they had to sedate her to be able to keep her still long enough to get the MRI. Doug was distraught. He couldn't believe that his machine, which he was so proud of, was having this dramatic effect on a young, sick child. So he set about trying to think how he could change this. What could he do? He couldn't change the technology. An MRI machine, at the end of the day, is an MRI machine. This was groundbreaking, award-winning technology. How could he change it? How could he change it in a way that was going to make it exciting or interesting or even not scary for a child? He rebranded it to this. And now what happens at this hospital is that when the child arrives at the hospital or is being called to get ready for their MRI scan, one of the nurses and doctors, dressed up as a pirate, comes and gives them an invitation to come on a pirate adventure. And they go on a treasure hunt. They go on a treasure hunt around the hospital, which culminates in them climbing into, this is no longer an MRI machine, but a pirate ship. And the child climbs into the pirate ship and has to stay really, really still for fear that the pirates might find them. Completely transformed the experience of the user of this amazing piece of technology. And Doug knew that he had cracked it when a couple of days later, he was standing in the waiting room, and one of the kids skipped out of the MRI room and said, Mum, when can we come back? And in fact, the number of kids who needed to be sedated dropped from 80% to well below 10%. An amazing, amazing result, just by changing the message, changing the image, and changing the way in which the users were feeling about the technology. Here's another, this time a video, and a really interesting use of a branding message to connect with the user. And we'll talk about it after we roll the video.
And our foundation manages an anonymous and confidential telephone line to attend children and teenagers under a risk situation. As a result of International Day Against Child Abuse, we launch a message for those once suffering any kind of abuse.
Okay, we have video malfunction. Are we going to have another attempt? No, video's dead. Sorry. Okay, let me explain it. So this is from the ANAR Foundation in Spain. Is anybody here from Spain? We have somebody from Spain. I don't know if you know the ANAR Foundation. But I was really amazed by this. So this is a street billboard, one of the rolling billboards. And one of the things about, this is an organization that deals with child abuse. And one of the things is that very often it's the guardian or the supervisor or the adult that, here we go. So I'll keep talking over it. But it's the adult that is looking after the child that is very often the aggressor and very often the person who's instigating the child abuse. So they're wondering, how can we get our message to the adults and to the children, but give a very different message to the child? And they use technology on their billboards to give a completely different image and message to the child. So if you're 10 years or under, your eye level looks at this screen at a different angle and allows you to see a very different message, which tells you if you're being hurt, call this number, right? So a really, really amazing understanding of the dynamic of children who are in that situation, an understanding of the context in which they live, and then I think a really innovative use of technology to be able to go and to connect with them and to give them a message. So let's move on. I think one of the very important things about branding and about innovation is summed up wonderfully by Maya Angelou. This lady was an amazing poet and writer and activist from the civil rights movement in the US. She worked with people like Martin Luther King, with Malcolm X. But she says that people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's really, really important for what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days. Here's another really powerful example, and I'd like you to watch this and think about how it is that you feel. How do you feel after watching this video? Are we going to have this one? Thumbs up, let's go. pretty powerful. Human traffic signs. Taking the victims of car accidents and putting them on the side of the street where they had accidents, holding their signs. And this was done by a car company. So again, hugely emotive and hugely powerful piece of brand advertising. Here's another one, this time much more fun, and this goes back a few years. So this, again, a car brand. This is Volkswagen. And this is the fun theory. Has anybody heard of this campaign before? The fun theory? Yeah? So this is, Volkswagen has this feeling associated with their brand around fun. They want their clients to have fun. They want their cars to be seen as fun and so forth. So this is a campaign that they did, and it was about trying to make the world a better place by having fun. And a very interesting part of this was that the Volkswagen branding throughout the whole campaign was actually very, very subtle. It appeared in a very small corner at the very end of the various videos. Now, the campaign ran for a while and culminated in a competition where they took the best idea that had the most impact and was the most fun, and they awarded it a prize. And these videos online, I think, now have upwards of 35 million views. So it's pretty impressive. You should go and have a look at them because they're quite fun. I'll share a few with them. I'm not going to go through the videos. But this was a subway in Sweden. And the question was, how could we make people a little bit more active, get them off the escalator and onto the stairs, right? So they turned the stairs into a piano. And the video is amazing. You see these people arrive at the subway station, and they're about to go down the escalator, and they go, hang on, what's this? It's a piano. And they go up and down the stairs like this, trying to play tunes. It's crazy. So the result of this one was that 66% of the people who used to use the escalator then started using the stairs. It's probably not the thing you'd want to do with a hangover, because I'd say it would hurt your head. So that was one. This was another one, which was recycling your glass bottles into an arcade game. So this is a recycling box, and you went down, you pressed go, and you had to throw your bottles in the hole where the lights lit up. And again, big jump in the number of people recycling bottles, which up until that point wasn't really happening. So again, you know, a fun thing that drove great social impact. But my favorite is this. So I love cars, I love driving, and this was called the traffic ticket lottery. So what would happen is, as you were driving through this particular location, every car would be recorded, and their speed would be recorded. If you were over the speed limit, you would get a ticket. If you were under the speed limit, your car registration would also be recorded, and you would be entered into a lottery. And you would be entered into a lottery to win the money that had been paid by the people who had broken the speeding. Right? That's pretty good. That's a good incentive. 25% reduction in the number of people who are speeding through this particular location. So an example of how you can have fun. You can create this good sense of fun, and you can still do good at the same time. Now, after focusing on the user and understanding what it is that's really at the essence of the user experience and what's driving them to act, we also focus on freedom. This is a picture of our office in Zurich, where you can go and get into a foam bath, like proper foam, and you can stare at a fish tank if you need a few minutes and you need to innovate or think or reflect or do whatever you need to do. So if you've ever read the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, one of the principles that's put forward there is that as a startup and as a young company, you have to take risks in order to make a leap forward. And as you become successful, invariably you start to put, good management says that you put processes and structures in place to minimize risk, right? So the thing that made you successful, you are now trying to kill because you are successful, right? So in Google, what we try and do is we try and fight back against that, and we try and give people freedom. We try and give them freedom to think and freedom to innovate and freedom to work the way they want to work. We try not to look over their shoulders too much. We want to free them up. Now, to prove this, we're going to run a little experiment. I hope you'll indulge me. So if you can all take out your clipboards for a second. And behind, at the back page of the clipboard, you will have some white paper. and you will have a marker, right? Everybody got it? Now, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to perform an act with your clipboard and your pen, right? And I'm going to start the clock just in a second. You're going to have 60 seconds. I want you to turn to the person sitting beside you, and I want you to sketch their face. And the clock starts now. Thirty seconds left. It's getting serious now. You've only 15 seconds left. All right, time up. Pens down. Now I want you to turn around and I want you to show the drawing to the person you drew. All right. Okay. Now, one of the objectives of this event is also networking and making new friends. I sincerely hope you didn't make any enemies during this. Now, so more serious note. So as you showed your, I'm sure, amazing portrait picture to your model, how many of you started with, I'm really sorry, or I'm not a great drawer, or this is terrible, and oh, how many of you, hands up, seriously, how many of you did that? Right? Okay, so now I want to show you a little video. So this is a video that I took at home of my daughter after I asked her to draw me. And we roll the video.
Yeah.
You happy with it?
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
The butterfly and the sun and the sky and grass and you.
And me?
Yeah.
Is there anything that's not good? Everything good?
Yeah.
Good.
I forgot about the shot, so this time I'm going to do the shots. So.
Okay. Very good. No shirt. I've got no clothes on.
Sorry, I'll do clothes this time, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Right. The only person in the world who will think I look good with no clothes on. But there's a serious point to this. So Cara, when she drew me, that was the best drawing of her daddy in the world. It was perfect. It was perfect. She was confident. She stood behind that, and that was her daddy. What confidence? Well, we all had that confidence when we were 5. Every single one of us. But as we get older, we kind of lose it a little bit. Right? We lose that inner child. And I think it's a very, very important trait that we all need to cultivate and we need to bring back. And a very important part of this is the culture that you have within your business to enable it. Very often when somebody comes into a room with a new idea, a harebrained idea, the first response is, no, but don't be silly, that's never going to work. Or no, but look, you've got no clothes on, that's terrible. Right? Well, what about if we changed the conversation? And what if the conversation became, yes, and we built on the idea? So again, this is not a unique or an original or a new. I'm sure you've heard this before. but how much do we actually practice it? When was the last time you caught yourself saying, no, but? And I want you to think about when's the next time you're going to say, yes, and. Here is an example that really typifies this. Who knows Shreddies? Right, some people know Shreddies. So Shreddies is a cereal that's been around for about 60 years. And it's very popular in Ireland and the UK and New Zealand and Canada, right? But having been around for 60 years, they, for some reason, after all that success, started finding themselves falling out of the minds of the people who were buying cereal in the supermarket. Maybe it's the explosion of choice that people had, but it was unclear. So the brand was gradually dying away, if you like. There'd been very little investment into the brand over the previous 15 years, and it was rapidly losing market share. So in Canada, they tasked their agency, in this case Ogilvy, with going out and trying to do something, trying to take a fresh look, if you like, at the brand. And there was a guy in the team who was an intern, who'd only been in the company for 3 months. His name was Hunter Somerville, and he came up with a new idea. And they were having their creative meeting with all of the creative professionals who's been doing this for years. They're serious people, they know what they're talking about. And they were having their brainstorming, and somebody turned around and said, let's ask the intern, Hunter, any ideas? So Hunter held up a Shreddy, and he said, it's not a square, it's a diamond. To which everybody went, oh my God, Hunter, you're never going to be able to pass your degree and you're in the wrong industry, go on. But the person leading the session, she turned around to him and she said, hang on a second, Hunter, let's talk more about this. Tell me what you mean by square and diamond. And he said, well, the old squares are boring, but these new diamonds are really exciting. And they launched a campaign. They launched this campaign, which has run, and it's had hundreds of press articles. It has had hundreds of YouTube videos where people are expounding on the virtues of old and boring versus new and exciting Shreddies, right? It's been incredible. But you know the campaign was a success when the user demand came back to the company, and in order to overcome the distraught division in their population, they had to create a combo pack where you could be boring and exciting all at the same time. How about that? Another key principle for us is prototyping, right? It's about going out and trying new ideas. So I'm sure many of you have heard of Google Glass. So the very first prototype of Google Glass was made using whiteboards and chopsticks and some hair bands and I think some elastic tape or some sellotape. Guesses on how long it took? 45 minutes, right? 45 minutes. And they thought, hang on, we might have a good idea. And one of the key principles of how we work in Google X, but in many parts of Google, is fast and rapid prototyping. So as they push forward, the goal for the Google Glass team was to create 20 prototypes every week, right? 20 prototypes every week. And with every prototype, gather feedback, figure out what failed, what worked, try and build it into the next bottle, but move fast. Fast prototyping. So what does prototyping do? Surely it's just experimentation. So there's some really good research now that shows the value of prototyping. Without prototyping, you tend to be a little bit more conservative. You feel more averse to risk. You tend to try less ideas. And the ideas you do try, you stick with because you're, oh my God, I can't try any more ideas. I don't want to fail. And you have a lot of slow failures. But you do have some successes. But when you prototype, you tend to try an awful lot more. You have no slow failures and lots of fast ones. But look at how many more successes you have, right? And in the world of modern technology, in the world of branding, this really opens up the doors for what you can do. You can create very, very low budget and low effort campaigns that you can test in very, very small numbers of people and get amazing feedback. And if you adopt this policy of prototyping and iterating very, very fast, you can really build amazing campaigns. And sometimes the outcomes are surprising. So if we can roll video, please.
Jag är trött.
Stig, seriöst? Alltså, Jerry bara...
Ja, då var det dags. Sköt om dig nu.
Ja, men nu är Jerry faktiskt trött.
Stig, din kavaj ser lite stor ut.
Då får jag försöka fylla ut den. Det är så här.
So anybody here from Sweden? We have some. So this is a well-known retailer in Sweden, ICA. And in 2001, they set out to do an advertising campaign that has turned into a sitcom. And every week, they create a new 1-minute long piece of video content talking about the latest promotions and offers within the brand. But the sitcom and the characters within the sitcom also live and promote the values of the organization. Now, the amazing thing about this, and I think this is a great example of something that was tried, it was innovative, but they've really used new technology to take it to new lengths and new extremes. There are many, many of the episodes of this mini sitcom that have over 1 million views on YouTube, let alone whatever views they've had through other media, but many of them. But the most amazing thing for me, and the reason I showed you this video, so this video is thanking Hans. So there was a little bit of a change in characters. Hans has gone off to retirement, but he has been doing this for 13 years, and he has shot 512 episodes. So 512 episodes for a retailer, a grocery retailer, where every week they go on, they talk about the values of the store and the latest offers in the shop. That's watched by millions of people every single week. And I think that type of prototyping and iteration and changing the message and using new technology to distribute it can be really, really powerful. But I want to talk and come back to the other aspect of prototyping, which is failure and fast failures. So in Google, we have this thing called the Penguin Award. Many teams do it, and there's a kind of a culture of recognizing the penguin in your team. So for those who aren't penguin fans, I will explain to you how penguins go looking for food, right? So penguins, when they start to feel a bit hungry, will gather together in a group, and they'll wander around, and they'll get to the edge of their ice floe, and they'll look in. And they'll kind of look at each other and what do you think, any fish in there? Not sure, maybe. And then eventually, one of them will jump. Now, if he comes back, thumbs up, everybody else jumps in. If he doesn't come back, they all go, oh, that didn't work, and they go off to the next ice floe. Right? So the Penguin Award at Google is to recognize bravery. Recognize the person who's assessed, or the team, who've really assessed all of the different challenges, who've thought about, you know, what's the likelihood of success, and then they've taken that leap. They've jumped in, potentially to the jaws of a shark, but they've jumped in nonetheless, and we recognize that. And it's very important that people aren't afraid of failure. They've got to feel that good failure is something that's appreciated. Now, the final theme that I wanted to talk about is 10x, right? So at Google, you will often hear about 10x thinking. And Google X is all about 10x thinking. And we have a nickname for it, which is the Moonshot Factory. And the Moonshot Factory comes from the challenge that JFK, the President of the United States, threw down to his nation back in the 60s, where he said, we will be the nation that puts the first man on the moon. And it was an incredible statement and an incredible challenge in the scope of the thinking and the audaciousness of what he did. Nobody thought it was possible. Nobody thought it was possible. But what it did was it galvanized the entire nation, from school children all the way through to leaders of industry, to think about how can we break all of the rules and go and do something that's so crazy as that? Is it possible? Is it possible? Now, if you go out and you talk about trying to improve something by 10%, what you will do is you'll look at what you have today and you will try and tweak it. You look for a little bit of efficiency or a little bit more performance or a little bit more something. But if you have to do it 10 times bigger, likelihood is the first thing you'll do is you'll throw out what you have today because you know it's not fit for purpose, and you'll go back to the drawing board and you'll do something different. And that culture of thinking big is something that, again, is very much at the heart of our organization. And Larry is very much thinking about how can we constantly reinvent and constantly innovate. And he thinks this is really important to stay relevant and to stay fresh. In fact, if you look at the research, and if you were to look at the Standard & Poor's, the S&P 500 from 1955, 85% of those companies no longer exist anymore. You know, think of companies like Kodak. The same year that they filed for bankruptcy was the year that Instagram sold for $1 billion. One of my favorite innovators is Netflix. So in 1997, Reed Hastings said, "Oh, why do I need to get off my couch to go to the video store? The internet is here. Surely I'd be able to use the internet to take an order, and then I can send people DVDs." And he set up this amazing business. In 2011, though, he had an insight, and he said, streaming is coming. And he walked into his exec team one day, and he said, you know, the way I see technology, streaming is coming. Lots of nodding heads. Yeah, it's coming. Technology's coming that way. And I think we need to get into the streaming business. Everybody went, yeah, makes sense. And they all left the meeting. They all left the meeting thinking, oh, this is an interesting idea. I wonder how long, like, will it 5 years? 5 years for streaming? How long will it take us? 3 days later, the DVD division was moved out of their headquarters, and everybody was focused on the streaming opportunity. Reed Hastings pivoted the company 3 days later on what he believed the new future was. But the way in which he works and the way in which he innovates and the approach he takes to his business continues to be those big leaps. The next big one was around the content, right? So he was gathering all of this data about the way people were watching content, the type of content that people were watching. And he said, you know, nobody sits down to watch their favorite series at the same time every week, right? Everybody sits down, they watch it at different times, they watch 2 episodes, sometimes they watch 6. Some nutheads go and watch an entire series all at once. And he said, we're going to make content. Now, the traditional way of doing TV is you go out and you do a very complex script writing, you go and run a pilot program. If the pilot gets good ratings, then you sign people up for a series. Not Reed Hastings. He sat down, he looked at his data, and he said that 2 things go really well. Kevin Spacey, everybody always loves his content. And there was a director, David Fincher, everybody loves his content. And when David Fincher and Kevin Spacey work together, that's usually good. So we went out and he signed up David Fincher and Kevin Spacey for 2 series of something called The House of Cards that nobody had ever seen before, let alone read a script. And they launched it. And they've launched that, and they've launched many, many more. And they've changed how the world thinks about not just watching content, but how they think about making it. And in fact, their product design team is organized around their different types of users. They have 3 teams. They have the 10-foot guy team, the 2-foot girl team, and the 1.5-foot guy team. Anybody know what that's from? So the 10-foot guy is the person who watches their content on a TV screen. And the average viewing distance to a TV is 10 feet. The 2-foot girl is 2 feet, typically to a laptop or a desktop. And the 1.5 feet is somebody who's watching on a mobile phone or a tablet. And their product design teams, again, with this insight from their data, completely changes the experience depending on what device you're working on. And this culture that sits within their organization of taking big bets, really empowering people, giving them the freedom to go out and do crazy stuff is pervasive. And these are two slides from the corporate culture deck, if you like, of Netflix. And it's iconic within Silicon Valley. I think there's very few people who've worked in or had a relationship with Silicon Valley that haven't read through this deck. We've got responsible people thrive on freedom and are worthy of freedom. We all go to amazing lengths to hire amazing people. We want to give them freedom to be amazing. They are worthy of that responsibility. Netflix, they take it to another degree. This is their vacation policy, their holiday policy. Netflix vacation policy and tracking. There is no policy and tracking. In fact, you can take holidays when you want. You can work when you want. You can come into the office when you want. It's entirely down to you because you're worthy of that freedom. And here's one that he, I think, actually stole from Google because Eric Schmidt said this first. There is also no clothing policy at Netflix, but no one comes to work naked. Right? So that's the amount of freedom that they want to give their staff. Absolute freedom. They want to put them in an environment where they can have big ideas, where they can focus on the user, and they can do amazing things. So how can you adopt an innovative approach to branding? Let me try and sum it up for you. So the first thing is you should always wear clothes. I think we've learned that. But remember these three themes. First one, focus on the user. Put yourself in the user's shoes. As you develop your messages and your brands, think about how you make them feel. Not what you're saying, not what you're doing, but how you're making them feel. Give yourself and your teams freedom. The freedom to act like children. The freedom to have crazy ideas. More yes and. It's not a square, it's a diamond. Yes and. How can we take that forward? And the freedom to fail with our little penguin down here. It's not a great penguin, but freedom to fail. And then finally, 10x, right? 10x thinking. What's the moonshot idea that'll help you throw away the old ways of doing things, forget about the current systems, and potentially come up with a new idea and a new way of thinking? And I'll leave you with the quote of one of my favorite innovators of all time. Because if it wasn't for innovators, I probably would have ended up coming to work on a horse this morning. Thank you very much.